So today is a book talk on the first book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, Game of Thrones. This one is a reread for me. The beginning, as always, of the book talk is going to be spoiler-free for this one. The subsequent videos are obviously not going to be because they're sequels. The first time I read this book was back in 2013, and I loved it. Before that, I probably wouldn't have, like, if you had told me a book is fantasy, I would have, like, stuck my nose up at it and just not been interested. Up until I started this series, I was really into just, like, hard-hitting contemporary. I'm pretty sure that was, like, a majority of what I read was, like, hard-hitting contemporary, anything that would break your heart, anything that would hurt you, and historical fiction. Honestly, those are still two things I absolutely love. But in recent years, I have realized that, like, at first, this was the only fantasy I read, and I still stuck to my other two safe place genres. But more recently, I have been enjoying more fantasy, and I plan to read even more as time goes on. I am definitely learning new things that I love, and I love having a huge array of things to choose from. At this point, I think the majority of the population knows the basis of a Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire. If you've seen the movie, if you've seen the TV show, or if you haven't read the books yet, I'm sure a lot of you kind of know essentially what's going on. It's not a super complex plot, really. It's essentially a whole bunch of people fighting over a throne. It's very politically driven, a lot of cunning and undercutting, and just there is so much happening in this book, and there are so many characters, and I'm saying that in a good way. Like, I feel like a giant cast can either be really amazing or, like, really confusing, and I find, at least for me, this book did not confuse me when it goes from person to person. I absolutely love getting different views and different scenes, and sometimes you see, like, a character from their point of view, and then you see that same character from someone else's point of view. But the spoiler-free part of this is not going to be very long, I'm sorry. If you haven't read it yet, I really suggest that you try it. Personal experience, I've tried the audiobook for the reread, and I hated it, and I ended up just reading it myself, like, physically. I'm not a huge audiobook person, though, but I really hated the voice of whichever option was on. I think it was Audible or whatever. I tried the sample, and I couldn't stand it, so I would say physically reading this, at least in my experience, is better. Also, there are definitely, like, rape scenes and things, or, like, of that nature in this book. There's also a lot of killing and a lot of that. So I feel like, for me, I tend to read at different speeds. If I'm just reading, like, an info dump of, like, what things look like, I tend to read through that fairly quickly. If I'm reading a conversation, I tend to slow down and read it at talking pace. And then, like, you know, the more graphic scenes, I don't feel the need to, like, dwell on them and soak up every single word. I kind of just read through those a little faster and just continue on my way. But I did enjoy physically reading this. Upon the reread, I definitely annotated it. There's tons of quotes in here. Characters that I love, characters that I hate, characters that kind of change over time. If you haven't read Game of Thrones yet, I highly, highly recommend it. Cannot recommend it enough. I wouldn't necessarily say this will be the best thing for anyone who's getting into fantasy to try first. A lot of people would probably say, like, no, try something a lot simpler. But this was the first fantasy book I ever read that I can think of. And this is the first, like, fantasy series that I have finished all that is available. So this was definitely a good starting point for me. That doesn't mean it'll be a good starting point for you. But if you like fantasy and you like really complex characters and just being able to really picture everything around you, and I love this book. So anyway, spoiler part starting now, because I don't know what else to say. I cannot say enough good things about this book, and when I first started on BookTube back in summer 2018, it hasn't been that long, but when I first got on here, I really never saw anyone talking about a Game of Thrones. Like, nobody. And then all of a sudden, it started creeping up here and creeping up here and creeping up here, and I'm getting really excited about it because I love this series, and I really hope that it does get finished someday, because I am now in the same boat with everyone else that just wants to, like, read the ending of the books. I also watch the show, so I will know loosely how things go, but obviously the books that are out up until this point stop pretty far back from the show. So anyway, getting into this book, I definitely have to say, I don't even know where to start. I have so many tabs and so many things. I have just like notes upon notes in the back, and I kind of just kept track of like talking points and things like that in the back, but you guys know I'm very relaxed in these. I just kind of tell you my thoughts and I tell you my feelings, and they come out however they come out. Feel free to respond to anything down in the comment section. The reason I do the book talks is because I love to talk to you guys about books, and this gives me a way to interact with people who've read the same things that I have without giving spoilers in my regular videos and ruining things for other people. One thing that I really appreciate about a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire, what I really appreciate about the characters in this book is pretty much every single character is has like morally gray kind of aspects. I would say that Jon and Ned are probably the most, like, to me, when I think about them, they're the most like perfect. But then also upon reread, because looking back on it, that's how I felt. Upon the reread, I definitely have noticed that they are honorable to the point of prideful. I would say that they are both very prideful, more so probably Jon, but like Ned, he definitely, like, for his honor, and anybody, you guys have read this if you're watching this part, but obviously Ned's big thing is learning that Joffrey is not Cersei and Robert's son, it's Cersei and Jaime's son. And obviously he is trying to set things right, and he just screws stuff up so bad. And I know he's trying to do the honorable thing, and this boy king shouldn't be sitting on the throne because bloodlines and yada yada yada. That being said, he was willing to risk the lives of his entire family. He was willing to risk a war, and he did all those things. One thing I did forget until I reread this was that he did actually break his honor in the end to lie to try and save Sansa. I definitely forgot that that happened for some reason. I thought he stuck to his guns the whole time, but he definitely did come out and say, nope, I was wrong, da da da, and then Joffrey kills him anyway. Oh my goodness, I hate Joffrey so much. I hate him. Oh, I hate him so much. But I feel like Ned, he was trying to be honorable to a fault. Like, it was a fault. It wouldn't have, like, to me, I feel like whoever rules a kingdom rules the kingdom. And yes, it's supposed to be succession and whatever. But at one point, Littlefinger tells him, like, play the long game. And I mean, I don't like Littlefinger either. He's an SOB. He sucks. Littlefinger just wants power. He's, like, loyal to whatever will get him more power. He just wants to get through life, get rich, and he doesn't care who he steps on. Which is why he screwed over Ned, and Ned shouldn't have trusted him. But he told Ned, he said, look, Ned, play the long game. Let him be king for a while. You can be his hand. You can, maybe he might have made him less of a crappy person. I don't know if that's even possible. But honestly, you look back and you're like, man, you should have listened to Littlefinger. But then you've got Cat, who decides to steal Tyrion, who is one of my favorite people ever. But she decides to take him because she's decided that somehow he has a vendetta against her son and she hates all the Lannisters. And so she screws stuff up there, and there's just, it's like even if one person fixed, it's a domino effect. And he wrote that so well, the way that there's just, even if you fixed one person's behavior, someone else already screwed something else up. And somebody else, and you've got like Stannis, who really isn't in this book at all. He is off on Dragonstone, and then you've got Renly, who is Robert's other brother, and he's plotting his own crap, and everybody is just, like, it wouldn't have mattered even if Ned did do the wrong thing in saving his family. There was no getting out of it. He almost did. He almost got to go back, and then Jaime busted his leg, and he ended up back at the castle, and they couldn't leave, and there's just, like, there's so many things. You couldn't just stop one character's bad decision because everyone else is still making bad decisions. Left, right, and center. And then Catelyn. Let's talk about Catelyn for a second. I don't like her. Not really. There are times when I feel, like, empathetic for her, where I feel for her and I feel bad for her, but I don't really like her. I feel like she's kind of brash and quick to, like, make decisions, and she just kind of sucks. Like, in the beginning, Ned's like, I don't want to be hand, and she's like, you have to, Ned. It's the honorable thing, blah, 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 or whatever she says. And then he decides to do it because he has to, and she's like, no, don't go, and like, well, you told him to go, you told him this, and then you completely screwed up. And then with, oh man, how did I forget her son's name? And then with Robb, she meets him up and he's getting ready to go to this war, and she's like, look, it's okay to turn back, but everyone will think you're a wimpy baby and no one will ever listen to you, even though he's 15. And then, like, the right thing to do probably would have been to go back and not start this huge war that was impossible to win. And then what does he do? He just goes for it anyway. And then she's like, oh, I wish we hadn't done this. And it's like, well, you pretty much backed him into a corner. Like, you said either go to war and die or go back home and no one will respect you, which is BS. It's, oh man, she's just so like, this or this. Like, she was like, run home with your tail between your legs. Like, I can't remember her direct quotes, but I just don't like her. Plus, she's horrible to Jon. Like, she loves Ned so much, and that's great. They're married, whatever. But Ned cheated on her. Jon didn't cheat on her, and she treats him like scum. It's so awful. I hate the way she talks to him. Oh, I hate it. Also, I love Jon. I'm just gonna say that. I love Jon. I definitely, like, I loved the parts where he was put in his place, like when he gets to the wall, and he's kind of, like, I forgot that he was acting like he was better than everybody else, or acting like he deserved more and stuff like that. Like, he definitely had, like, a sense of entitlement that I completely forgot about. He was very prideful when they decide to make him a steward for the Lord Commander. Is that what he's called? And he's, like, frowning upon it, and Sam's like, hey, you idiot. He wants to, like, groom you to be the next Lord Commander. Like, you idiot, why aren't you paying attention to this? And I was like, oh man, Jon definitely does still have faults, because I was thinking, like, how does anybody not like Jon? He's so great, da-da-da-da. But I can definitely see how, like, his pride gets in the way of things. Definitely in the beginning, he was a lot more prideful than I thought. And then next on the list, who have we got here? Bran. I have to say, I feel like Bran is an important character, but I don't really care. Like, I feel like Bran's chapters are just, I don't know, they kind of go like this for me. Some I really like, and then others I'm like, okay, yep, this is cool, whatever. Like, I just don't, like, I don't connect with Bran that much, but I do think that his character is really important. And even in future books, like, I wouldn't say he's ever been my favorite character, but I do think his character is important. Sansa, oh my, Sansa. She was so annoying. And I know Sansa was 11, and even thinking about it, I'm like, I don't care that she was 11. She was 11, and she didn't have, like, a loyal bone in her body except for to be queen and to be Joffrey's lady. And every time she spoke, I'm just like, you suck. You suck so much. And she blames Arya for her dog dying, or not her dog, her direwolf. She blames Arya for the direwolf dying, but guess what? You lied. I mean, I get it. You don't want to, like, maybe if you had told the truth, Joffrey would have gotten crap by Robert, and your direwolf might not have died, and maybe your dad wouldn't have died because he would have been able to tell Robert. I don't know. There's, like, an entire alternate story that could happen, and you're just like, and she's just so annoying. But then, as time goes on and she starts to see Joff's, like, true colors, I start to feel for her more. I definitely, by the end of the book, like, I remember in the second book, it was definitely the book where I started to like Sansa, like, a lot. Like, maybe not a lot, but I definitely started to like her more. I'll let you know. I'll update that in the next one. But I definitely saw near the ending, I was feeling for Sansa a lot more, and she definitely was growing up, and, like, her character was definitely getting better, which I loved, because I loved that she went from someone who I just, like, loathed to slowly becoming someone that I really enjoy, and I loved seeing the development of that. It was just great. And then Arya, I love her in this book. In this book, I feel like she is quick, she's, like, quick-witted, quick-thinking, she's loyal, she's just so tough and, like, scrappy, and I love her character. Theon, I feel like I don't really like him. That's just my thing. I've never really liked Theon, but he goes in waves of like whether, like how I feel. I like him more in like the more recent books, but as far as the first one goes, I didn't really like him. And then, okay, so Daenerys. Let's quickly talk about her because I like her a lot. And I know she's like some people's like favorite character, and I do really like her story. And I love watching how everything like unfolds and her, I mean, the dynamic. I am so sorry if the quality changes on this or whatever. My camera battery, 2 batteries just died. I don't know if my batteries are just like kaput or if I just didn't charge them enough. I don't exactly know. But I was about to go off on my thoughts on Daenerys' storyline, and I feel like they're a little controversial compared to like what is available to hear, or at least from what I've heard at the moment. And so starting with Daenerys, obviously there's the relationship between her and Viserys, and her brother is a disgusting human being. There wasn't a single point in the book where he had any redeeming qualities. Same with like Joff. There's just like those two in particular, I feel like they have 0 redeeming qualities about them at all. There's just nothing good. It's all bad. But essentially with Viserys, like reading this, I could not wait for him to get his golden crown. I was just like waiting for that part because I just loathe him entirely. He is just horrible, and he's so abusive of Dany, and he does things to her to purposely hurt her. And I think because I think like a popular thought process is she sort of gets like a bit like a Stockholm syndrome for Khal Drogo. And I think for me the like difference between the two relationships is with the Dothraki people, the way that they do things, they're more customs, and that doesn't make them okay. Obviously, if those things were happening now, they would be more widely talked about and disagreed with. But back in the time that it was set, that was just the way they did things. That was the way the people did things, and that was the way the entire like tribe or whatever it is you want to call it did things. And so I feel like the relationship with her and Khal Drogo was definitely one where like she was sold by her brother, which was pretty awful, but the way that the Dothraki see it is they think that they were given a gift. And so he took her as his wife, and the thing with Khal Drogo is there was never a point in the book where he did something to purposefully hurt her. Like, if anything, he protected her, he kept her safe, he took out Viserys because Viserys was trying to hurt her. And so I feel like that is where the aspect of her falling in love with him was, because regardless of how their relationship started and the fact that they just were like an arranged marriage and then they ended up having to have sex and all that kind of stuff, like I understand how her thought process changed. Like I kind of get it. Doesn't mean that if it happened now I would agree with that. I obviously wouldn't. But back when this was set in a fantasy world with these fantastical people, I feel like that makes sense, because she went from a relationship, not like a romantic, but she went from this relationship where she grew up with her brother who was horrible to her for her entire life, used her for his own gain, to someone who loves her in whatever way he knows how, protects her, keeps her safe, and cares for her. So you just like, I feel like the two dynamics, it makes sense for her to find safety in Khal Drogo because she felt safe with him. She knew he wasn't purposefully trying to abuse her and hurt her. So I feel like that is kind of why I don't read those scenes as like rape, because I feel like with rape there's intent to hurt, and I don't think that was the case with this book. I feel like it was more of a custom, regardless of whether or not that custom would be okay now, it wouldn't. But in the book, I keep saying this because I feel like people are going to come at me, but in the book, I feel like that is what made sense to me, and that's just kind of how I felt about that particular thing. So I guess I'm going to kind of talk about friendships in the book that I like, because that's what I'm going to do next. When my batteries were dead, I had to go and make tea. Oh man, this is hot. Because I keep getting like a really dry throat and it's sucking the life out of me and I keep coughing. So anyway, the first like friendship that I saw, or like companionship that I really enjoyed, I haven't talked about Tyrion yet. We're going to talk about him and Jon together, but Tyrion is one of my favorite characters. even though he has flaws, I love Tyrion's character. I think he's witty, he's funny, he's a little self-deprecating, but like in the best way. Like he's just, he knows how people view him and he just kind of owns it and lives his life. He does his thing. But when him and Jon are at the wall together, I love the dynamic between the two of them. I know that, like, Jon obviously doesn't like him at first because he's a Lannister, and there's, like, all that strife between the northern people and the southern people and yada, yada, yada. But of all the Lannisters, Tyrion is the best one. You have to admit, Tyrion, he's the best one. He's the greatest. And I loved the banter between him and Jon. Like, there were multiple points where I have, like, yellow stickies and stuff and notes where I just loved the way that they talk to each other. And I feel like, oh, there's a part in the book where Tyrion's talking to Jon and he says, never forget what you are, for surely the world will not. Make it your strength, then it can never be your weakness. Armor yourself in it and it will never be used to hurt you. And I thought that was pretty cool. When Tyrion says to Jaime, death is so terribly final while life is full of possibilities. I think he's funny, and I feel like there's one other one. Oh, this one. I think this is my favorite Tyrion quote. And he is talking to Jon, and he says, and I have my mind, and a mind needs books as a sword needs a whetstone if it's to keep its edge. Which, who doesn't love a good quote about a person who loves books? Like, come on, Tyrion is this really amazing bookworm. But I loved the banter between him and Jon at the beginning of the book. I thought that was great. And then another, like, kind of companionship, which I wouldn't necessarily say companionship, but the Hound. Now, the Hound is pretty awful. He's one of these characters I'm talking about where he's terrible. But then every so often you get this little bit of humanity that shows through, like when he confides his, like, deep dark secret in Sansa and obviously scares the crap out of her to make sure that she never tells anyone. But the way that he treats Sansa, you can tell that he feels some sort of empathy for her. And he's still terrible. He gives her good advice. He tells her things. He's not, like, as rough as, like, Joff would have one of his other people be. Like, he's bad, but then once in a while you see things where he's not so bad. And that is, like, I feel like the Hound has always been a character that I struggle with because in some moments I'm like, oh, the Hound, and then other times I'm like, why do I think that? He's so terrible. But the Hound is definitely one of those, like, morally gray characters where, like, he's bad, but then there's also that little bit of, like, good in him. Oh my goodness, I forgot about Lysa. Oh, Catelyn's sister and her boy, like, she is the weirdest character, and I feel like she's just so, like, wrought with fear that she's essentially lost her mind. She just, like, she cannot deal. She cannot cope. She just wants to hide away and stay out of things and hide and just, like, be protected by her giant mountain rock fortress thing. Oh, another Tyrion quote that I forgot about is, there's much to be said about taking people unawares. You never know what you might learn. Which, I mean, obviously eavesdropping isn't so great, but when you're in this book, eavesdropping is just fine. Anyway, oh man, there's so many points. Like, so what I have, like, tabs, which are, like, quotes and events, and then I have, like, stickies where I'll, like, kind of sum up my thoughts on certain chapters, if you will, or whatever. So the pink ones are, like, ones that ended on a good note, the orange ones are ones that ended on an angry note, and the green ones are, like, I guess, like, plot points or, like, things where you're, like, or, like, foreshadowing moments or just, like, things where you're like, oh, that's what this meant or whatever. Like, just, like, kind of moments of enlightenment, I guess. Anyway, I think I'm gonna end this here. I've got a lot to edit. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please comment down below if there's anything you want to talk about or points that you had or if you disagreed or if you agreed. Put all that down below because I want to talk to you guys. I absolutely love reaching out to you guys in the comments. I think it's so great to hear all different perspectives and have a good conversation about it. I think that's really awesome. Please subscribe and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss out future videos. And I will talk to you all soon. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!